Hello, y'all. Today I will be talking about Texas education. The great state of Texas is known for its manufacturing, oil, and agricultural industry. It ranks 15th across the nation for its economy, according to usnews.com. Additionally, according to Texas politics professor Brian Herrera, he claims that Texas ranks third nationally for the number of full-time state employees. Perhaps, maybe even one of your parents works for any of the named workforces. Today, we can agree that students are living in Texas's booming economy. However, not everyone is receiving a booming education. According to the Washington Post, for nearly a decade, Texas has been decreasing its state funding in schools, which has severely affected some public schools. Today, I will be talking about the methods that Texas uses to fund its K-12 public education, the effects these methods have, and also a possible solution. Segregation in the United States has been marked illegally over the past 65 years. Despite these advancements, schools today in the United States, including the ones in Texas, have remained separate and unequal. According to a research synthesis, Unequal School Funding, it claims that public schools in Texas are funded via local, federal, and state resources, and over one-half of these resources come from local property taxes. Local property taxes are the largest source of money that the government uses to fund your community. It helps to pay for the roads you drive on, the streets you walk on, and the public K-12 education you once received. However, this method of funding has resulted in a gap between the wealthy and the poor communities. You see, depending on the community's affluence, that will determine the amount of money that a community is able to receive. Thus, the poorer an area is, the lower the home values and the less taxes that are collected, which results in less money they can provide to their school districts. However, Texas does fund its schools through another way, and it funds its schools through state funding. State funding is the funding that Texas uses that is supposed to make this unequitable system more equitable, closing the gap between wealthy and poor communities. However, because Texas has been decreasing its state funding over the past years, schools are having to rely more and more on property taxes. But how does this affect schools? So for economically disadvantaged areas, with the lack of financial resources these schools are receiving, schools are having to stretch every single dollar they have in order to make ends meet. Sometimes these schools don't have enough resources or enough money to pay for sufficient books, sufficient supplies, or even teachers. Doctors Biddle and Berliner, both from the University of Missouri and Arizona State respectively, have done research to show these effects. An example of their research is one that takes place in Oklahoma, where they were able to compile 11th graders' standardized scores and determine the effects that underfunded schools had on their education. And they were able to conclude that the more money they are able to spend on a challenge education, or the more money the schools are able to spend on the challenge education, the better they're able to fund, or the better they're able to fund these children, and the better that they will perform on standardized exams. Now, this is an example in Oklahoma. However, Texas is no exception. Every year, the Texas Education Agency releases a report that grades schools based on a student's academic achievement and the school's overall progress. In HISD, the Texas Education Agency released a report in which 75% of the Ds and Fs are attributed to districts with high rates of economically disadvantaged students. This information can be found in the texastribune.org. Thus, schools that reside in areas of lesser wealth are performing worse in comparison to their wealthier peers due to the insufficient funding these schools are receiving. However, this is not only the case in HISD. Now, let's look at these two maps. This is Bexar County, which is home to UTSA, and Bexar County is located in San Antonio. Now, at a glance, these two maps look very similar in their patterns, and that's what I want to discuss today. San Antonio has been accredited with one of the most economically disadvantaged cities in the country. Their high poverty rates and low education outcomes severely affect these students. According to governing.com, they claim that the lack of rigorous courses, the lack of teachers, and other external factors affect the outcome of these students, which leads them to be unprepared for college. which is basically what this whole map is symbolizing. Students who reside in areas of lesser wealth tend to not have higher education, and as a result, they're stuck in a poverty cycle in which they cannot escape. And generation after generation after generation, these students are stuck in the same areas and are unable to escape this cycle of poverty. According to A Lesson for San Antonio, which is a research paper written by Emily Donaldson, she claims that opportunities are limited, and the negative statistics of graduation, dropout, and outcomes after high school are added to the historical trends of the school and city. Until acted upon, this economical divide will continue to oppress students within these areas. But is there a solution to this? And I believe so. Although there is no easy answer to this question, one thing we can do is to increase taxes all around Texas. Now, I don't like this idea any more than you all do, but if we truly belong to a nation who claims to be indivisible with liberty and justice for all, then we should really stand up by those words. By increasing our taxes, we will be able to increase the state funding Texas has for its schools, which would result in an equal playing field for every student, since students will now be better funded and would have a better education, thus increasing the opportunities for everyone. Additionally, I would like to let you all know that according to usnews.com, Texas ranks in the bottom half for education across the nation as a whole. So by improving the funding that schools have for their students, we can help Texas grow through its education. However, according to The Atlantic, opponents of similar potential reforms might argue that money is not a problem and that increased spending won't lead to better outcomes at schools in poor districts. However, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, after courts orders public schools to spend more on low-income students, students begin to do better and better. Now, in conclusion, today we have all learned how public education in Texas is funded, the effects these methods of funding have, and also a possible solution. As Texans, or even just a member of our society, we should strive to provide every student with an equal playing field that can help them define their future. So I challenge you to talk to your friends and family about the situation and encourage them to vote when the time comes in order to provide better funding for students. Also, I encourage you to contact your representatives and push them to make a positive change in the Texas Education Agency that can help Texas overall, and it can potentially help out the country as well. Thank you all for coming.